Never go to the farm, Catherine, promise me. Those were the words my husband Joshua whispered one evening years ago, his eyes darker and more urgent than I had ever seen them. We had been married for almost 24 years at that point, and in all those years he had never placed such a command on me. Joshua was not a man of ultimatums. He was gentle measured, always thoughtful. So when he asked me with such intensity to make that promise, I did. I never asked why, never pressed him to explain. I thought it was simply a shadow of his childhood, some unresolved pain connected to a piece of land in Canada where he'd grown up. But now Joshua was gone. A heart attack had stolen him from me, suddenly leaving me a widow at 52, a high school English teacher with a bitter grieving daughter and a cavern in my chest where my certainty once lived. 2 weeks after his funeral, I sat in the oak-paneled office of his attorney, Mr. Winters, the smell of old leather and paper thick in the air. My hands trembled as he slid a small box across the desk. Inside lay an antique brass key attached to a maple leaf keychain and a sealed envelope in Joshua's familiar handwriting. "Your husband purchased a property in Alberta, Canada 3 years ago," Mr. Winters explained, adjusting his glasses. "According to his instructions, you were only to be informed after his passing. The deed has been transferred into your name. All taxes are prepaid for 5 years. A property Joshua had never mentioned land in Canada. He had forbidden me from even thinking about the family farm. It's called Maple Creek Farm," Mr. Winters continued. "Apparently, it was his childhood home. Though it changed hands several times, your husband repurchased it. There's something else. Significant oil deposits were recently discovered in the region. The property has become quite valuable. There have already been inquiries." I stared at him dumbfounded. Joshua, who had lived on an engineer's salary alongside my modest income, had bought land in Canada and oil. What secrets had he been carrying? With trembling fingers, I opened the letter. "My dearest Catherine," it began. "If you are reading this, it means I've left you too soon. I'm sorry for all I didn't say, for all I couldn't face. Maple Creek Farm is yours now. I've spent the past 3 years transforming it, turning it from the broken place of my childhood into something beautiful, something worthy of you. I know I made you promise never to go there, but I release you from that promise. In fact, I ask you to go just once before deciding what to do with it. On the desk in the main house, you'll find a laptop. The password is the date we met, followed by your maiden name. I love you, Kat, more than you'll ever know." Tears blurred the words as I clutched the letter to my chest. Even in death, Joshua was full of riddles. "I need to see this place," I said softly. Mr. Winters nodded gravely. "Then I must warn you, Joshua's family in Canada has contested the will. His brothers claim he was not of sound mind when he repurchased the property." The thought of men I had never met, men who had been absent for decades of my life with Joshua, contesting what was his, and now mine, ignited something sharp inside me. "I'm going," I told him today. 48 hours later, after a flight and a long drive, I stood before imposing iron gates, etched with the words, "Maple Creek Farm." Beyond them stretched rolling hills, maples aflame with autumn, and a sprawling white farmhouse glowing in the late light. This was no crumbling relic. This was an estate. My hands shook as I turned the key in the lock and pushed open the front door. The air smelled of cedar and new paint. Exposed beams stretched high above a stone fireplace, and everywhere were paintings, sculptures, and photographs of horses. My passion, my lifelong love, the thing Joshua had always tolerated but never shared, filled the space in breathtaking tribute. On a desk by the window sat a laptop, just as Joshua had said, a single red rose laid across it. Before I could take a step, I heard tires crunching on gravel outside. My heart seized. Through the window, I saw a black SUV pull up behind my rental car. 3 tall men climbed out, men with the same dark hair, square jaw, and piercing eyes as Joshua, his brothers. I locked the door and backed away, pulse thundering. They mounted the porch, their knock sharp and insistent. "Mrs. Mitchell," one called voice carrying a Canadian lilt. "We know you're in there. We should talk." I stayed silent. Joshua had been vague about his family, but always emphatic, "Never trust them." Ignoring the pounding at the door, I sat at the desk and opened the laptop. The password unlocked immediately. A folder appeared on the screen labeled "For Catherine." Inside hundreds of video files. The first one was dated just 2 weeks ago, the day after Joshua's funeral. My breath caught as I clicked it. His face appeared vibrant and healthy, his smile crooked in the way that always melted me. "Hello, Kat," he said, his voice rich and steady. "If you're watching this, then I'm gone. And you've come to the farm despite my years of trying to keep you away. I should have known you wouldn't resist." I covered my mouth with trembling hands. "I made a video for every day of your first year without me," he continued. "1 year of keeping you company while you grieve. 1 year of explaining what I never could while I was alive. Starting with why I bought back this farm I swore I'd never set foot on again." The knocking outside grew louder. The brothers were now showing documents against the glass, their faces twisted with impatience. Joshua's voice pulled me back to the screen. 3 years ago, I was diagnosed with hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, a heart condition I inherited from my father. The doctors gave me 2 to 5 years. I chose not to tell you or Jenna. I didn't want pity. I didn't want our last years overshadowed by death. Shock rattled through me. He had hidden this from me, from our daughter. "I know you're angry," Joshua said, eyes filled with remorse. "But I hope you'll understand. I bought this farm not for them, but for you. To give you the land you always dreamed of, filled with horses you've loved since you were a girl. But my brothers..." His expression hardened. "They'll come for it. They never cared about this place until oil was found nearby. They'll try everything to take it from you." Outside, one of the brothers was on the phone, gesturing angrily while another pounded the door again. In the bottom drawer of this desk, Joshua's voice continued, "You'll find a blue folder with every legal document you need. The farm is yours, Kat. Unquestionably yours. I made sure of it. Whether you keep it or sell it, that's your choice. Just know whatever happens, this was built for you." The video ended, freezing on his smiling face. With shaking hands, I opened the desk drawer. The blue folder was there, thick with notarized deeds, contracts, and surveys, evidence of Joshua's careful planning. But before I could read more, the sound of sirens cut through the air. A police cruiser pulled into the drive, lights flashing. The brothers stood straighter, smugness written across their faces. A knock sounded again, this time firm and official. "Mrs. Mitchell, RCMP, please open the door." I clutched the folder to my chest, my heart pounding. Whatever secrets Joshua had left for me, whatever war he had prepared me for, was only just beginning. The officer's knock echoed through the farmhouse, steady and authoritative. My palms were slick with sweat as I clutched the blue folder Joshua had prepared for me. My husband's voice still rang in my ears. "They'll try everything to take it from you." I opened the door cautiously. 2 RCMP officers stood on the porch, their uniforms crisp against the fading light. Behind them, Joshua's brothers hovered, their expressions a mix of smugness and feigned concern. "Mrs. Mitchell," one officer asked politely, "we've received a call regarding a property dispute. These gentlemen claim the estate may have been obtained under questionable circumstances." My pulse thundered. This farm was purchased legally by my husband and transferred into my name upon his death. I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I have the documents here." The eldest brother, Mark, I would later learn, stepped forward with a sneer. Joshua wasn't in his right mind when he signed those papers. He was sick. He didn't know what he was doing. Anger flared in me, but I remembered Joshua's words. "They'll come for it." I laid the folder on the entryway table, opened it carefully, and handed the officer a notarized deed bearing Joshua's signature and date. Every transaction was handled through his attorney, Mr. Winters, in California. Nothing was hidden. "This land is mine." The officer examined the pages, then nodded curtly. "We'll review this with the registry. In the meantime, I'd advise both parties to seek legal counsel. Until then, no one has the right to harass or trespass on this property." Mark's jaw tightened. He muttered something under his breath as the officers led them away. Their SUV roared down the gravel drive, leaving me trembling in the doorway. When the cruiser departed as well, silence reclaimed the farm. I sank into a chair, clutching Joshua's letter to my chest. My grief felt heavier than ever. Not only had he hidden his illness from me, but he had prepared for a war I hadn't known existed. I turned back to the laptop. Another video waited, time-stamped a week before his death. Joshua's face appeared again, softer this time, tiredness shadowing his eyes. "Kat," he said gently, "if the brothers have already come, I'm sorry. I wanted to protect you from them while I was alive. They see the farm as money, nothing more. But for me, for us, it was always more than that. You've loved horses since you were a girl. You dreamed of a stable, a sanctuary. I wanted to give you that dream. The camera panned briefly, revealing stables behind him, horses grazing peacefully in golden light. I gasped, tears welling. He had built this for me. Walk to the back pasture tomorrow, he said. See what I've prepared. It's all yours, Cat. A place to heal. When the video ended, I pressed my hand to the screen, whispering through tears, "Why didn't you tell me, Joshua? Why keep this hidden?" That night, I barely slept. Every creak of the farmhouse made me jump. Every shadow outside the window felt like one of the brothers watching. By dawn, I decided to follow Joshua's instructions. I walked across the dew-soaked grass toward the back pasture. The autumn sun lit the fields in hues of gold and scarlet. And then over the hill I saw it, a sprawling stable, newly built, painted white with green trim, its roof gleaming in the morning light. Horses whinnied softly inside their sleek coats, catching the sun. My breath caught in my throat. Joshua had given me my childhood dream, a sanctuary for horses and for me. I stepped into the stable, the smell of hay and cedar enveloping me. Each stall was meticulously prepared, water troughs filled, feed bins stocked. On the far wall hung a brass plaque for Catherine with love. I broke down, then sobbing against the cool wood of the stall. The grief of losing him crashed over me again, but mingled with awe at his devotion. Even as his body betrayed him, he had poured his final years into creating this haven for me. When I returned to the house, exhaustion pressing at me, I noticed a new envelope slipped under the front door. My blood ran cold as I bent to pick it up. Inside a single sheet, "Sell the farm now, or we'll make sure the truth about Joshua's past comes out. You don't know who you married." My hands shook violently. What truth? Joshua had always been private, yes, but secretive. What were they threatening me with? I returned to the laptop, desperate for answers. Another video file awaited, dated just 3 days before his death. Joshua's face appeared again, paler now, but his eyes still steady. "If they've threatened you, Kat, you need to know the truth. My childhood at Maple Creek was not what I told you. My father was abusive. My brothers and I endured things I've never spoken aloud. But when I left, I built a new life with you. You were my salvation. They'll twist the story, make me out to be unstable, but don't believe them. You know who I really was. You saw it every day." I pressed pause, my heart shattering. Joshua had carried this pain his whole life, never sharing it with me. He had buried it under kindness, under our marriage, under quiet sacrifices, and now his brothers were trying to weaponize that silence. I sat in the farmhouse until dusk, staring at the horizon. I had choices: sell the farm and walk away, or fight to honor Joshua's legacy. The weight of grief pressed heavily on me, but so did the memory of his voice, his devotion, his trust. When night fell, I locked every door and curled on the sofa, the blue folder clutched tightly to my chest. Sleep came in fits, and in the darkest hours I woke to headlights sweeping across the window, tires on gravel. The brothers had returned. Headlights crawled across the great room like slow white snakes, sliding over the paintings of horses and the stone hearth, then vanishing and returning as a vehicle reversed and repositioned. Gravel popped beneath tires. A door opened and slammed. Another. Voices low at first, then emboldened by the dark. I rose from the sofa and stood absolutely still, the blue folder pressed to my ribs like a shield. The air tasted metallic, the way it does right before a storm breaks. I thought of Joshua's steady voice on the video. "They'll try everything to take it from you," and felt my breath slow, not from calm, but from choice. I refused to be the woman they expected to find, frantic, apologetic, uncertain. I turned off every light in the house except the entry lamp and waited. Knuckles hit the door frame 1, 2, 3, deliberate as if knocking on a fact. "Catherine." A man called, the syllables clipped by a cold prairie accent. "It's Robert Mitchell. Open the door. This can be simple." Simple. Men like this always believed in simple. Simple lies. Simple threats. Simple endings. I set the folder on the console table and slid the chain into place. When I opened the door, the width of my palm, October night breathed on my face. 3 figures on the porch. Robert in front, older than Joshua, with the same bone structure hardened into angles. Alan a half step behind holding a leather portfolio. The youngest David watchful, unreadable. The trio wore the polished confidence of men who had never been told no when no mattered. Mrs. Mitchell Roberts said, attempting a sympathetic smile. "It's late. We didn't want to upset you. We only want to talk." I let my gaze move over them without hurry. "You brought an SUV and threats earlier. You called the police. If this is how you talk, I'd hate to see how you negotiate." Alan lifted his portfolio like a talisman. "We have a court order authorizing inspection of—" "The constable reviewed your papers this afternoon." I cut in, voice low but even. "He disagreed with your interpretation. You'll pursue your claims in civil court like everyone else." I let the chain creak, a subtle reminder of boundaries. Not at my door in the middle of the night. David took a half step forward, palms out. "Catherine, we're family. We understand you're grieving. Joshua made rash choices at the end. We're here to fix them before this gets ugly." Heat rose in my face, not from fear, but from a flash of protective rage so bright it startled me. "My husband's final years were thoughtful, deliberate, and sober," I said. "If anything was ugly, it was whatever made him spend those years preparing for you." We stood there, 4 shapes, tethered to a doorway by blood neither of us shared. Wind moved through the maples, lifting the porch's chimes into a thin, eerie song. Robert's smile dissolved. "Last offer, Catherine. Sign a memorandum of understanding tonight, safe harbor for everyone. Tomorrow we formalize. You'll be fairly compensated and we avoid scandal. Refuse and we take this public. All of it. Joshua's medical condition, his secrecy, the incidents from his youth. You don't know everything you think you know." I saw the move as clearly as if he'd telegraphed it. Shame, by rumor. A widow taught to flinch at shadows. I put my hand flat against the door, my mothering voice the firm one I used with entitled seniors, who thought plagiarism was a negotiation rising to my tongue. "You're not welcome on this property after dark. Leave now. When you're ready to proceed like civilized people, have your attorney contact mine. Otherwise, the RCMP will meet you here again." Alan's lip curled. "You think a schoolteacher can run this oil deal's mineral rights? This is bigger than you." Nothing I said, meeting each man's eyes in turn, is bigger than a promise made by a good man to the woman he loved. Especially not 3 bullies on a porch. Something old and cruel flashed through Robert's expression, a ghost of the boy who learned power by cornering weaker things. He leaned in until the chain went taut. "You will regret this." He turned first. The trio retreated down the steps like a single organism, and the dark swallowed their shoulders, then their backs, then the glow of their phones lighting crisp ovals in the night. The SUV's engine caught a rough cough of combustion, then faded down the lane. I shut the door and slid the bolt. The house exhaled. I didn't realize I'd been shaking until I tried to pick up the folder again and the papers whispered against one another like leaves. I pressed them flat, set them down, and went to Joshua's laptop as if it were a hearth, as if light itself lived in that dull silver shell. Another video today's waited. I clicked it, half afraid he'd appear altered by death, half hoping he'd step out of the screen the way a man steps into a room. There he was, alive in pixels, that crooked smile, that careful kindness. "If the night feels long, Cat," he said softly, "make tea. Find the big mug, the blue one with the chipped rim, and sit by the window. It will trick your mind into remembering all the ordinary nights we survived side by side. Then in the morning, go to the stables. Ask for Ellis. Ask for Ellis." The name was a rope thrown across the chasm the brothers had opened. I made the tea exactly the way Joshua suggested, too much honey, too much comfort, and sat by the window until the dark thinned and the fields emerged, a slow pale reveal of fences and frost. At first light, I walked to the stables. Breath lifted from the horses in soft white puffs. Leather creaked, a living sound. A man stepped from the tack room, wiping his hands on a cloth 60-ish, weathered with the solid ease of someone long accustomed to animals and land. He removed his cap when he saw me. "Mrs. Mitchell," he said, voice gentled by respect. "I'm Ellis. Your husband brought me on 3 years ago to manage the horses and keep the place running right." He didn't offer pity. He didn't offer awe. He offered steadiness, and it felt like medicine. Joshua mentioned you in a video, I said. He asked me to find you. He nodded once as if confirming a plan. Then I reckon we have a lot to do. We walked the aisle together. He told me names as if introducing friends in Andalusian with eyes like polished walnut. A broad-chested Frisian black as midnight, 2-quarter horses compact and ready to work, a high-strung thoroughbred with a braided forelock, and an Appaloosa whose spotted coat looked like the night sky had broken and fallen onto him. My hand found each warm neck. Those horses knew something about grief, how it sits in the body and makes the breath shallow, the stride short, and they breathed into my palm as if to widen my lungs. Your husband said you used to ride, Ellis said without looking at me. In college, I admitted. Before life started using words like mortgage and health insurance. He grinned. Then the muscles remember. We'll take it slow. But the horses were not why Joshua had told me to seek Ellis. When we reached the far stall, Ellis paused the way a man pauses at a door he knows is heavy. Mrs. Mitchell, he said, lowering his voice. There's something your husband built that he didn't put on any public plans. He told me to keep it quiet unless trouble came to your very door. He held my gaze. Looks to me like trouble has your address. He led me out the rear and across the yard to a weathered barn that hadn't been touched by the renovations. It sagged like an old story. Inside, dust swam in light gold and patient. Hay bales, old plows. Nothing special until Ellis rolled aside 3 bundled tarps and exposed a trap door sunk into packed earth. Your husband had this installed last winter, he said, shouldering the door up. The hinges complained, then yielded. A wooden stair dropped into a square of cool darkness. A shiver walked my spine. Joshua's breath somehow seemed to rise from below. We descended. Lights flicked on, humming awake one by one, until the concrete corridor revealed itself, clean, dry, remarkable. 30 paces, and the tunnel opened into a room lined with filing cabinets and maps. A work table stood under a lamp. On the walls, surveys, aerials, overlays. On the desk, a small safe, a computer tower, a framed photograph of Joshua as a teenager beside a chestnut horse joy-lit wild across his face. Your husband called this his war room, Ellis said with a rueful affection. He did not trust his brothers. He prepared. I moved to the maps. The farm was printed in meticulous layers, topography boundary lines, watercourses, and overlaid with translucent sheets stippled in red and orange and blue. The annotations were Joshua's hand-neat decisive. He knew about the oil I asked. Not when he bought back the place, Ellis said. Later, when rumors proved true on the Petersons' land 2 properties over, he hired his own geologist to run quiet surveys. See there? He tapped the western acreage, the rough, unlovely hills the brothers had ignored. That's the big deposit, not where everyone thinks. Deep, tricky, but real. I stared until the dots became a pulse. All at once, the brothers' hurry made sense. Their proposal to divide fairly snapped into its intended shape, surgically excluding what looked worthless. Joshua had mapped the truth and tucked it underground. And this, I asked, tapping the small safe. Ellis rolled his shoulder as if adjusting to a familiar weight. Evidence, he said. He gathered things: old financials, sworn statements, emails. He believed if your brothers-in-law came at you sideways, you'd need leverage to face them head-on. I opened the safe with a key Ellis produced from his pocket. Inside, manila folders waited like quiet witnesses. I read enough to feel a cold clarity: forged documents from decades ago, a duplicate of a transfer paper Joshua had signed with his father, a memo about missing funds, not rumors, receipts. I sat at the work table and pressed my fingers to my eyelids until the starbursts faded. They've already called my daughter, I said. Jenna. I could hear the sweetness in their voices through her anger. They'll turn her if they can. Ellis nodded, sorrow threading his voice. Grief makes any story with a father in it sound like a lullaby. But your girl's got your fiber. Give her the truth in her father's own words. Joshua's videos. Of course. My hand went to my phone as if it knew already. I texted Jenna, not an argument, not a plea. Just call me when you can. I have something of your father's you need to see. 3 dots appeared, then vanished, then appeared again. Later she wrote, busy. I read that single word 3 times and could not find my breath in any of them. Back at the farmhouse, I queued up another video one Joshua had labeled only with a date and the word, explain. He sat in the library I had walked through that morning, books he chose for me lining the walls. If they reach Jenna, he said without preamble, as if we were in the middle of a conversation, they'll use 2 things, family and fear. They'll say I abandoned them. They'll say I was unstable. They'll say I didn't trust you. All of that carries a grain of truth, and that's why it will sound like a world of truth. Here is the hole I left, because staying meant becoming them. I kept the farm from you, because I wanted to return to it first, to change the endings written on its walls. I went quiet because I wanted our home with you to be a bright country no shadow could enter. He swallowed, eyes bright. If you are hearing this and it hurts, let it hurt. Then use what's in the safe. I paused the video on his face and let the stillness ring. Across the room, the doorbell sounded, once clear, civilized, then again insistent. I turned the laptop toward the wall, slid the blue folder under my arm, and went to answer. It was not the brothers. A woman stood on the porch, late 20s, sleek hair pulled into a careful twist, a leather tote tucked against a pressed blazer. She looked like the kind of person who arrives with a contract already drafted in her mind. "Mrs. Mitchell," she asked. "I'm Diane Reeves. I work with Robert." She glanced back at the empty drive, assessing. "He thought you might talk to me when you won't talk to him." "Then he doesn't know me," I said. "No. I understand your position," she said quickly. Professional empathy turned up to a persuasive glow. "But your daughter Jenna has questions. She asked me to meet you. She's on her way. It is a particular cruelty when surprise takes the shape of your child's name." "You spoke with Jenna." Briefly, Diane said, carefully neutral. "She's driving up from Calgary. She said she wants answers from the only person who can give them." Somewhere in my chest a spring wound tight. Love and fear wind the same way at first. "Fine," I said, measuring each word. "She can have answers, but she'll hear them from her father first." Diane frowned, obviously unprepared for that. "I'm not sure You don't need to be sure," I said, and closed the door gently. I moved through the house with sudden efficiency, printed 2 still frames of Joshua's face, one with his smile, one with his eyes half laughing, as if about to tell Jenna a corny joke. Set the laptop on the coffee table, pulled chairs close, opened the blue mug cabinet as if tea could anchor a storm. Then I stood at the window and watched the lane until a compact silver car appeared, fast and purposeful, the way Jenna always drove towards certainty. I met her at the door. Her hair Joshua's dark color, my unruly wave was pinned back like armor. She smelled faintly of peppermint and airport soap. "Mom," she said, voice tight, "what is happening?" "Everything," I said. "And we're going to slow it down." Her eyes flashed, then softened at the sight of the laptop and Joshua's paused face. "Is that—" "It is," I said. "Sit with me. Let your father speak." Behind her on the drive, Diane's sedan idled like a held breath. Beyond the maples, the wind rose. The house held steady. I pressed play. Jenna sat stiffly on the sofa, arms crossed, her eyes darting from me to the laptop where her father's face waited frozen in mid-sentence. For a heartbeat, I saw my daughter as she had been at 16, angry, closed off, unwilling to let anyone in. Only now she was 23, her armor sharper, her mistrust heavier. "Play it," she demanded. Her tone was clipped businesslike, as though this were just another meeting to endure. I pressed play. Joshua's image flickered, then steadied. His voice filled the room, rich and warm, the way it always had when he read bedtime stories. "Jenna, sweetheart, if you're watching this, it means I've gone. And it also means your uncles have found their way back into our lives. They'll tell you stories about me, about the man I used to be. They'll say I left them behind, that I lied to you, that I kept secrets from your mother. Some of that is true, but listen to me carefully. I left because I couldn't become them. I hid the farm because I wanted to heal it before you ever set foot on it. And I kept my illness quiet because I wanted your final years with me to be about life, not dying." Jenna's lips parted slightly, her eyes wide. Her hand twitched as if to reach for the screen. Joshua continued, "You've always been strong, stronger than you realize. But strength is not pride, Jenna. Strength is knowing when to trust, when to forgive, when to fight. Trust your mother. She is wiser than you know. She is the reason this place will survive. The video ended. Joshua's face frozen mid-blink. Silence swallowed us. I waited. The room held only the ticking of the grandfather clock and the faint rustle of wind against the shutters. Jenna stared at the laptop, her throat working. Finally, she whispered, "Why didn't he tell me? Why didn't either of you tell me?" Tears stung my eyes. Because he wanted you to live free of fear, even if it meant carrying the burden alone. He thought he was protecting you, protecting us. Her gaze snapped to mine sharp again. Or maybe he didn't trust us. Didn't trust me. And now I have to hear the truth from a computer screen. I flinched. Her words were knives, but they weren't cruel, they were raw, the way grief makes truth cut deeper than it should. "I understand," I said softly. "You feel betrayed. I did too when I found out. But Jenna, listen. He built this place for us. For you. It's not just land. It's a chance to keep his memory alive without letting his brothers twist it into oil and profit." Her face hardened. "They already called me Mom. They told me he wasn't well, that he was unstable, that he made rash decisions. They said you're being manipulated by a fantasy he left behind." I shook my head, fury rising. "They want control, Jenna. They don't care about your father's memory. They never loved him the way we did." Her eyes glistened, anger and sorrow colliding. "And what if they're right? What if you're just clinging to dreams while they take everything from us?" Before I could answer, the front door rattled with another knock. My stomach clenched. Diane's polished voice floated through Mrs. Mitchell. "Jenna, we only want to clarify a few details. This doesn't need to get hostile." Jenna shot me a look, half questioning, half pleading. She was torn, caught between two versions of the truth. I stood my voice firm. "We're not opening that door, not tonight." But Jenna rose. "Mom, maybe we should at least hear them out." Panic surged through me. "No, not without counsel, not without proof." I grabbed the blue folder, flipping it open to show her the notarized deeds, the geological surveys, the signed contracts. "Look at this, Jenna. This is evidence. Solid, undeniable. Your father was meticulous. He prepared for this." She scanned the documents, her brow furrowing. I saw the doubt falter just slightly. The knocking ceased. Tires crunched outside as Diane's car pulled away, leaving us in silence again. Jenna sat back down heavily, her eyes glistening. "I don't know what to believe anymore." I reached for her hand. For a moment she resisted, then slowly her fingers curled around mine. "You don't have to believe me," I whispered. "Believe him." I replayed Joshua's video this time, letting it run past his words to me, to the part where he spoke directly to her again. His eyes softened, his smile crooked. "Jenna, my darling girl, if you're angry, be angry. If you're hurt, let it burn. But don't let that pain turn into the greed that destroyed this family before us. You are my hope. You are the best of me. Trust your mother. She's stronger than both of us combined." Jenna covered her face with her hands and sobbed. I gathered her into my arms, feeling the years peel away, feeling the child I had raised tremble against me. For the first time since Joshua's death, we wept together. When she finally pulled back, her eyes were red but steadier. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll fight with you, not against you." Relief flooded me so suddenly I thought my knees might give. "That's all I ask?" But I knew the battle wasn't over. The brothers wouldn't stop. They would return with lawyers, with courts, with threats darker than what we had already faced. Later that night, as Jenna slept upstairs, I returned to the tunnel beneath the barn. I spread Joshua's maps across the table, tracing the red and orange dots that marked the oil reserves. My husband had left me a war chest, not just of money but of truth. And as the moonlight slanted through the farmhouse windows, I felt something new stir in me, not just grief, not just fear. Resolve. The next time they came, I would be ready. The morning after Jenna arrived, the farm felt different. Not lighter, grief doesn't evaporate overnight, but steadier, as if the land itself sensed I was no longer alone. The autumn air was sharp with wood smoke drifting from nearby houses, and the horses in the pasture moved with calm rhythm, tails swishing, heads bowed to graze. I stood on the porch with a mug of coffee, watching my daughter through the window as she scrolled through her phone. Even through glass, I could read the tightness in her posture, the hesitation in her jaw. She was still deciding whether to trust me, to trust her father's memory. When she finally came out, her hair damp from a shower, she sat beside me in silence. For several minutes, We only listened to the creak of the old boards beneath our feet. Then she spoke, her voice low. "They've already filed a petition in Calgary. Uncle Robert texted me this morning, said I should come with him to the next hearing. Said you're blinded by grief." My stomach twisted. "And what do you believe?" She turned her eyes toward the horizon where mist hung low over the maples. "I don't know. But Dad's video, the way he looked at the camera when he said my name, it felt real, like he was here." Tears threatened, but I held them back. "Because it was real, Jenna. He planned all of this so we wouldn't be left with nothing but confusion and greed. He wanted you to see the truth for yourself." She bit her lip, then asked quietly, "Do you have more videos?" I nodded. "Hundreds. One for every day of the year after he died." Her eyes widened, and for the first time since Joshua's funeral, I saw something fragile return to her face: curiosity, hope. That evening we watched two more together. Joshua spoke of his youth in fragments of nights, when the farmhouse had been filled not with warmth, but with shouting of bruises hidden beneath long sleeves of silence kept out of shame. He confessed how he had run from it all, how he'd sworn never to return. "Your uncles will tell you I abandoned them," Joshua said in the video. "The truth is, I survived them, and now I'm giving you a place where survival doesn't have to mean running away." Jenna's eyes shimmered and she whispered, "Why didn't he ever say this when he was alive?" "Because he thought protecting us meant carrying it alone," I said, brushing her hair behind her ear the way I had when she was a child. "But now he's telling us in the only way he could." For a moment she leaned against me, her head on my shoulder, and I let myself breathe. The bond between us wasn't whole yet, but it was mending. The next day a letter arrived by courier. The bold header, "Mitchell versus Mitchell," made my hands tremble. It was official. Robert and his brothers were contesting the will, claiming Joshua had been mentally incompetent at the time of repurchase. Their evidence, they claimed, was testimony from neighbors who remembered Joshua's heart episodes and documents suggesting he was manipulated by outside influences. "They're painting you as a gold digger," Jenna said, skimming the letter with disbelief. "This is insane." "No," I murmured, folding the pages with care. "This is strategy. They want to drag me through mud until the court can't tell truth from lies." We sat in silence, the weight of it pressing down. Then Jenna said almost fiercely, "We have to fight back." It startled me, this new steel in her voice. Yes, I agreed, and felt Joshua's presence between us, nodding. The next week blurred into a storm of attorneys' affidavits and discovery requests. Mr. Winters coordinated from California, while a Canadian lawyer, Margaret Sinclair, became my anchor. A woman in her 50s with iron gray hair and eyes that missed nothing, Margaret studied the documents Joshua had left me and said simply, "He was very, very smart. And so are you for standing your ground." She warned us the brothers would strike with personal attacks, allegations, distortions of Joshua's childhood, even attempts to turn Jenna against me. But the evidence Joshua had preserved in the underground room was damning: forged signatures on old transactions letters showing the brothers had sold off family land years earlier for their own gain, financial inconsistencies that painted them not as victims but as predators. "They won't go quietly," Margaret said, adjusting her glasses. "But we have leverage, and leverage is how wars are won without blood." Court was set for late November. In the meantime, I leaned on Ellis to keep the farm steady and on Joshua's videos to keep my courage intact. Each night, Jenna and I watched one before bed, his face glowing softly on the laptop, his voice filling the farmhouse with warmth. Some were practical reminders about accounts, instructions about property. Others were deeply personal confessions of regret, declarations of love. One evening he said simply, "Kat, if you're scared, remember this: I trusted you with everything. That's not a burden. That's my faith in you." I whispered into the quiet, "I'll prove you right, Joshua." When November came, snow dusted the farm, turning the fields into a quiet white expanse. The courthouse in Calgary was a cold, imposing building of glass and steel. I wore a navy dress and my wedding ring, and Jenna walked beside me in black slacks, her chin high. The brothers sat across the aisle, their suits sharp, their glares sharper. Diane hovered near them, whispering strategy. The proceedings were grueling. Their lawyer painted Joshua as a man broken by illness, a husband manipulated by his wife into funneling assets into her name. I sat stone still, my hands folded while inside I burned. They spoke of Joshua as if he were weak, unstable, unworthy of the legacy he had so carefully built. Then it was our turn. Margaret laid out the evidence deeds signed in full competence medical records, showing Joshua remained lucid, the financial paper trail proving his deliberate choices. She introduced affidavits from Ellis, from neighbors who testified to Joshua's quiet but steady presence at the farm in recent years. Piece by piece, she dismantled their narrative. But the most powerful moment came when we played one of Joshua's videos. His face appeared on the courtroom screen and a hush fell. "If you're hearing this in court," Joshua said, eyes steady, "it means my brothers couldn't let go of greed long enough to let me rest. But everything I did, every signature, every plan was deliberate. Catherine did not manipulate me. She saved me. She gave me the courage to face this land again. The farm belongs to her because she is the only one who ever saw it not as money, but as home." When the video ended, silence lingered like thunder. I glanced at Jenna, her eyes shone, her lips trembling. Across the aisle, Robert's face had gone pale. The case was adjourned for deliberation. We wouldn't have an answer for weeks, maybe months. But as we left the courtroom, people whispered not with suspicion, but with sympathy. For the first time, I felt the tide shift. That night back at the cottage, Jenna sat across from me by the fire. Her voice was quiet but steady. "He really did all of this for you." I shook my head, tears slipping free. "For us." She reached across the table and took my hand. "No hesitation this time. Then we'll finish what he started." I squeezed her fingers, the warmth of her grip flowing through me like light. The farm, the fight, the legacy, it was no longer mine alone. It was ours. The weeks that followed the hearing dragged like heavy chains across my shoulders. Every morning I woke before dawn, stepping out into the frozen air of the farm, trying to breathe courage into lungs that still felt hollow. Snow crusted the maples, the stables steamed with the warmth of living animals, and the farmhouse carried the silence of waiting. Jenna stayed with me, her laptop open for work during the day, her evenings spent watching her father's videos beside me one after another. Some nights she cried, some nights she smiled at his familiar jokes. And sometimes she said nothing at all, just rested her head on my shoulder, while the firelight flickered. It was in those quiet evenings that I began to realize the true gift Joshua had left us. Not the land, not the oil, not even the money. It was the bridge he had built between a grieving wife and a broken daughter, a bridge of words and confessions and love that carried us back to each other. But the brothers did not rest. Letters arrived almost weekly, filled with venom wrapped in legal jargon. They accused me of manipulating Joshua. They accused Jenna of conspiring with me. They even dug into Joshua's medical records, pulling out every fainting spell, every missed appointment, as proof of mental instability. I learned to stack their lies neatly in a drawer unread until Margaret could shred them apart in her office. Then one gray December morning the call came. Margaret's voice was brisk, but warm. "The ruling is in. The court has dismissed their claim. The property is yours, Catherine, permanently. The brothers have no legal grounds left." For a moment I couldn't breathe. "It's over," I whispered. "It's over," she confirmed. "You won." I sat at the kitchen table, the phone clutched to my ear, staring out at the frosted fields until tears blurred everything. When Jenna came running down the stairs, her eyes wide, I mouthed the words, "We won." She screamed, a raw release of months of tension, and wrapped me in her arms so tightly I thought my bones might break. Later that night, we played one final video together. It was dated just days before Joshua's death, as if he'd known the end was near. His face was pale, but his eyes burned bright. "My loves," he began, voice ragged but strong. "If you're watching this, it means you've faced them. It means you've stood your ground. And whether you won or lost in court, you've already proven stronger than they ever imagined. Catherine, you are the fiercest woman I've ever known. Jenna, you are my hope, my living legacy. Remember this: a family's true inheritance is not land or money, but the courage to face darkness and choose light. If you hold to that, then you've honored me in the only way that matters." The video ended, and for the first time since his death, I felt peace. Not the absence of grief, it will never leave me entirely, but the peace of knowing we had carried out his wishes, defended his name, and reclaimed the farm, not as a battleground, but as home. In the weeks that followed, the brothers disappeared from our lives. They had no leverage left, no claim to make, no lies left to tell. Their silence was its own kind of defeat. The farm grew quiet again, the stables filling with the soft sounds of hooves and hay, the fields waiting beneath their blanket of snow for spring to come. Jenna decided to stay at least for a while. She helped Ellis with the horses, her laughter ringing through the barn as she learned to ride again. One morning she came in from the pasture with flushed cheeks and whispered, "I think I finally understand why he loved it here." I smiled through tears. As for me, I found my own rhythm. Teaching had always been my anchor, but here I discovered a new purpose, preserving Joshua's dream, tending to the land, and opening the stables as a sanctuary, not just for horses, but for people like us, broken, grieving, searching for healing. Sometimes when the nights are long and the wind rattles the windows, I play one of Joshua's videos just to hear his voice again. And every time without fail I whisper back, "We did it, my love. We kept your promise." This story, my story, is not only about betrayal or greed or even revenge. It is about love strong enough to outlast secrets, about a husband who built a fortress of hope for the wife and daughter he adored, about a family fractured but slowly mending. If you've listened this far, if you've walked with me through grief, betrayal, and the long road to vindication, then I ask you, carry this story with you. Let it remind you that love leaves traces deeper than any wound, and that even the darkest legacies can be rewritten with courage. And if this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who may need it, subscribe to my channel for more stories like this, and leave me a comment below. Tell me what you felt, what you learned, or how this journey mirrored your own. Your words keep this community alive, just as Joshua's words kept me alive. Thank you for listening to my story.